So this is just moments ago. You can see him getting in the back of that RCMP vehicle. And Rachel, he arrived. He was not wearing handcuffs, so now his sentence begins. This 8-year sentence begins immediately, right?
Exactly. The second someone's sentenced, and if they're sentenced to custody, they step into custody right away.
Okay. The CBC's Karen Pauls, let's continue just to watch this. This is the scene, again, moments ago, of Jaskarit Singh Sidhu being escorted by RCMP officers where he will serve out his prison sentence beginning immediately. And that is what happened just moments ago as court has adjourned in Saskatchewan just after around 11:20 local time. And the CBC's Karen Pauls is standing by live outside of that makeshift courthouse. Tell us more about what you've been seeing and hearing and in terms of the reaction to this sentence.
No real reaction yet. We've seen a couple of family members come out, but they went straight to their cars and drove off. Most, I think, are still inside. We're hearing that some of them were sitting, silently looking at the judge's empty seat after she left. Some hugging, some tears, some emotional moments happening there. I think for some families, this is lower than they were hoping for. They wanted the maximum, and the Crown had asked for 10 years. That didn't happen. Others were saying they wanted leniency and they wanted mercy, and so for them 8 years will be very high. I did see just before we heard about the sentence a mother inside, mother of someone killed on that bus, who was crying and being comforted by grief counselors and just not understanding what was happening, what the judge was saying about mitigating and aggravating factors, all these legal terminologies that for a lot of people don't understand what's happening in the court. But I think there will be a lot of emotion, a lot of sense that, nothing will bring back their loved one, and that they just have to try and figure out how to move forward. I did talk earlier before court to Chris Beaudry. He was the assistant coach of the Humboldt Broncos who wasn't on the bus that day. He was following in his own vehicle to that playoff game. He came upon the scene shortly after, and he described to us earlier how he spent the first few weeks trying to comfort families, trying to get answers for them, trying to deal with injured players. He was the only one of the coaching staff left. He had so much on his plate. And I asked him, here, listen to this clip, I asked him how he was doing.
It's just another step I think we have to go through. And for some it may be hard, and for some it may be easier, but no matter what, it's just something that all of us are going to have to go through.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I know nothing I do affects today, so I'm just trying to stay present today, and whatever happens, it's not up to me.
And now we know what's happened, and for a lot of the families, Chris Beaudry was saying he hopes that this can provide some kind of an end to this chapter, and that families will find a way to move forward to try and adjust to the reality of not having their loved one with them or having an injured loved one. Also keeping in mind we're a couple of weeks out now from the first anniversary of that crash, which will be really difficult. One dad I spoke to yesterday, Scott Thomas, was saying it's excruciating as they're leading up, counting down to that day, and he said his wife already dreads every single Friday because of course that's the day that the crash happened. And he's gone away. He's gone on holidays now to try and gather strength for what will be coming. There will be an anniversary memorial service in Humboldt on April 6th. I think most of the families will probably be there for that. There to support each other and also just to mark that tragic moment. And then hopefully they can, away from the glare of the cameras and the media, and just try to figure this all out and move forward.
And Karen, we're hearing from our reporter inside saying that some of the victims' families remain in a private room off the main gymnasium, which served as the courtroom in Melfort. So I guess you've seen some families leave and some are still inside. Was your sense that they just didn't want to talk about this, that they just, from those that you saw, they just wanted to go home, maybe?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the ones who left, I think, were probably not immediate family. I didn't recognize exactly who they were, so maybe it was a supporter or grandparent or someone a little more removed. I think for those families who are here now, they're going to need a couple of minutes to adjust and to just absorb what's happened, and they know that Canada's waiting to hear what they might want to have to say afterwards, so maybe they're gathering their thoughts and just trying to figure out how to react to this, because the range of emotion will be happening in that room. Obviously, everybody's at a different point in their grieving process, so hopefully we'll be able to hear from some of them in a little while.
And Karen, we'll continue to talk to you, but I just want to show you the scene inside that gymnasium. There are some microphones that have been set up, and that is where lawyers or families will have the opportunity to speak. Whether they do or not, we're just not sure. And obviously this is a difficult day, and some may choose to speak, some may choose not to speak, and that's just the way it goes. And of course, on a day like today, what a difficult moment for them. But in the past, Karen, it really has been interesting, hasn't it, in terms of what the families have said to you, have said to the media in terms of what they wanted from today, the sentence that they wanted from today.
Yeah, I mean, there was the whole range, and it was interesting. I mentioned Scott Thomas to you. We met him in his house yesterday and talked to him. He was one of the first of the family members who actually met with Jaspreet Singh Sidhu. He mentioned last time we were here in January that he would like that opportunity, and it came actually the day after he said that. He got about a 15-minute private meeting with Mr. Sidhu, and he described how it was two broken men in an emotional scene, hugging each other, crying, and that sort of changed things for him. Up till then, he wasn't sure about forgiveness. He wasn't sure, what he would even have to say to the man who was responsible for his son's death, and he still is so hurting. You can tell. I mean, talking to him, he's very emotional. But that meeting of Mr. Sidhu and his family, and hearing, Mr. Sidhu was married just before this crash happened a year ago. So his brand new wife, his bride, has been sitting in the courthouse too, listening to all of this and supporting him. We saw family members coming in, and this has got to be hard, for all of them. But for the families, I think just getting a chance to hear from him directly, to hear him apologize, to take responsibility, I mean, that took the sting away for some of them a little bit, but they know nothing matters. They'd change everything if they could go back a year and have their loved one back. I mean, that's what they would hope for.
All right, Karen, we will continue to speak to you throughout the afternoon for more reaction outside of that gymnasium, that makeshift courthouse in Melfort, Saskatchewan. We are also just getting a statement from the Humboldt Broncos on the sentence, and part of it reads, "This past year has been extremely difficult. Having this legal matter settled and the sentencing complete is a big step in the healing process for the survivors. The sentence is subject to varying opinions, but what is important is that Mr. Sidhu pled guilty, has shown remorse, and has remained accountable for his careless actions." For more reaction, Aaron Fox is a criminal defense lawyer, and he has been in court with Judge Inez Cardinal a number of times. He joins me now from La Quinta, California. So, Aaron, what is your reaction to the 8-year sentence?
Well, I've briefly looked at the reasons given by Judge Cardinal, and she noted, as has been commented upon many times before, that there's no precedent for this. The biggest single aggravating factor were the large number of deaths and very serious injuries, unprecedented case of that nature. She did also note, though, that there were some other aggravating factors. That included the fact that he was driving a semi-trailer truck, which had the potential to cause great damage, and in this case did. That there was otherwise clear driving conditions, and he clearly missed a stop sign when he had an opportunity, or should have observed that stop sign. So I think she identified some aggravating factors as well in the driving which caused her concern, and which she very clearly wanted to send a message to the public that even though we're dealing here with someone with no previous record and clearly had no intention to cause harm or to do anything wrong for that matter, the message has to be to the public that you have to be careful if you're driving in circumstances like that, because the consequences can be catastrophic as they were here. And I really think that was the message that she was intending to send with her decision.
She said the carnage on our highways must stop.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what she was referring to that. Generally, when we hear those sorts of comments made, they do relate to drinking and driving offenses. This didn't involve alcohol. This was not particularly a typical case. We don't see a lot of criminal driving cases that don't involve alcohol. But at the same time, traffic accidents happen and they have significant consequences. So again, I think you're just making the point that if you're driving a vehicle, especially a vehicle like this, there's an extra duty of vigilance required because of the risk of catastrophic harm.
What do you make of the fact that this 8-year sentence comes fairly close to what the Crown was asking, 10 years?
It's hard to know what's an appropriate sentence in a case like this. This certainly is a big step up in the sentencing range for offenses involving someone with no previous record, pled guilty, clearly remorseful. Although this was dangerous driving, we've seen many dangerous driving cases with far more aggravating facts than this. So it does represent a fairly significant step up to increase the range of sentences that are available. Now, God forbid that we ever have to talk about a case like this again. Hopefully that this will be unique and you'll never be talking to me or anyone else about it. Another one.
She said, Inez Cardinal, the judge, said, it is inconceivable to miss so many warnings, referring to the number of signs that were indicating that there was a stop sign at this intersection that he did not stop. He went through, causing this terrible crash. What do you make of her use of that word, inconceivable?
Yeah, I think one of the questions here was, how do you balance his lack of experience as a semi-truck driver, his lack of experience on the road, driving in a province he'd never been before, on a road he'd never really driven before? How do you balance that against clear warning signs that there's a stop sign coming up and you should stop? I think, again, my interpretation is the message she was sending, look, even if you're an inexperienced driver, that's no excuse for not adhering to the rules of the road. And I think, sending a bit of a message that, again, if you're inexperienced, that just means you have to be all that much more cautious. That's sort of how I read it, because that is one of the significant aggravating factors. He drove a semi-trailer truck through a stop sign at a high rate of speed.
You've been in front of Judge Cardinal before. What were your expectations in terms of what she would consider in this case?
Well, I'll tread carefully here a bit, but Judge Cardinal was very respected as a prosecutor. She was a very fair, even-handed prosecutor, and generally prosecutors who conduct themselves like that, who become judges, are generally considered very good judges, and I think that would be the case with Judge Cardinal. There will be debate, obviously, here about the sentence. Some will see it too low, some will see it too high. It's a question of what should be emphasized and shouldn't be emphasized. But just reading the summary of her decision, it certainly appears that she's at least considered what all the significant factors were. After that, she's got to make a judgment call in an area where she didn't have an awful lot of precedent or guidance. And I said the most you can ask is that she consider all of the points, and then she's got to make a decision.
So am I right in saying that this is the longest ever sentence for dangerous driving in Canada?
It would be my understanding that this would be the longest sentence for dangerous driving in a case that didn't involve alcohol or a significant criminal record. You will have cases, say, for example, an individual charged with impaired driving and dangerous driving and will plead guilty to the dangerous driving. And even though they're not pleading to the impaired driving, the fact that they were impaired would be a significantly aggravating factor. To my knowledge, there isn't any case in Canada that didn't involve alcohol or a previous record where a sentence this long was imposed.
All right, Aaron, if you just hang on there, I want to bring in Rachel Lichman, who's a criminal defense lawyer here with me in studio. So that's a question to you as well. Do you think that this is probably the stiffest sentence for a dangerous driving offense?
Yes, it is, but like my colleague there said, in a case where it doesn't involve alcohol, right? The highest sentence before this was 6 years, and you could argue that it actually had much more aggravating factors, because in that case, the accused person did not plead guilty. He lied to police, he lied during the investigation, and he didn't show remorse. There were fewer deaths. I believe there were 4 deaths. So that was obviously a factor in deciding the sentence. But as an accused person, he was in a worse off position than Mr. Sadu was.
Okay, so that is interesting, Aaron, in terms of, because as Rachel has been saying, this is what a judge needs to consider, right? A judge needs to consider specific elements in this case, but also bigger societal deterrence as well.
Sure, and I fully agree with Rachel's comments there about that other 6-year case. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you looked at this individual, I don't think there's any chance he'll ever commit a criminal offense again. I don't think he'll ever be before the courts again. He clearly accepted responsibility and was truly remorseful for what he did. So the message really from Judge Cardinal is that to other drivers out there, if you're not vigilant when you're driving, especially driving a big truck like this, and you commit dangerous driving, you're going to be held accountable for it. And I think that's her message. Now, was an 8-year sentence necessary to accomplish that? That's where there will be some debate.
And that's what is interesting, right, Rachel, is that given that he did plead guilty, that he did show remorse, his words at that at the sentencing hearing was, I take full responsibility for what has happened. I have taken the most valuable things of your life. I will be so sorry from this day. So he and to plead guilty to all 29 charges, that's also unusual, right?
It is very unusual. Usually when an accused person enters into a guilty plea, their lawyers have worked out some kind of deal with the prosecutors where they're not pleading guilty to everything, where they get some kind of leniency on what they're pleading to based on the fact that they're pleading guilty early. But that's not the case here. He pled guilty to everything he was charged with.
And so that is why you, as a criminal defense lawyer, I know you're not questioning the judgment, but it surprised you that the sentence was 8 years.
Yes, it did. And, we have to look at general deterrence, but as the judge here said in her own words, it's not a straitjacket for each case, right? We really have to look at the accused person, and we do have to take into account how this is going to affect the accused person, how it's going to drive home the message not to do this again. But as Aaron had already said, this is not a case where we think that Mr. Sadu is going to reoffend. It's not a case where he has a criminal record. So to me, it's quite a shocking sentence, quite a serious sentence, and I don't think that such a long sentence was necessary in this situation.
Aaron, what are your thoughts on that?
I think I would agree with that. This is a case where, for some people, the sentence could never be long enough, and I fully understand that for some of the family members and that. There are other family members and people involved in the case who clearly recognize that we're dealing with someone who never involved in something like this and was truly sorry, and that sort of raised the question, what is the point in locking him up for a long period of time? But I think that to send the message to the public, I'm not sure you had to step out this far. And I guess what we're always looking at is what will be the impact of this sentence on other driving cases. Now, again, I hope we will never ever see a case with this many victims, but I mean, you can expect that if this sentence stands, assume there's no appeal or anything, that if we're dealing with a dangerous driving case without alcohol, without record, and there's 2 or 3 people who are killed, I'm sure the Crown will cite this as a precedent and argue that the sentence should be in that range.